Jennifer from the blog, The Everyday Farmhouse, and today I'm going to show you how to sew the cutest little shirred dress you can make for yourself. I'm making mine for my daughters. I have made one for myself before though. I actually learned this technique from the blog Farmhouse on Boone. Lisa did a tutorial on the shirring method, probably a year or so, maybe more ago. She had made a maternity dress for herself and I was expecting at the time, and so I made one for myself, and I was so excited that it was such an easy process that really any beginner sewer could do this. If you can sew and cut a straight line, or even if you can not really cut that straight or sew that straight like me, you can make this dress. It's very forgiving and it's so fun because I let my little girls pick out the fabric, and I'm doing mine with kind of like a 4th of July look, the red, white, and blue, but you could do whatever fabric you want. It's so fun to be able to I have made one for my daughter with just a remnant piece of fabric for my 4-year-old, so I made the dress for like $1. So the only thing you don't really need any special equipment. You'll need a sewing machine, so you'll need that. And then you'll need this elastic thread, and this I only found in black and white at the store where I shop, but I don't know if they make other colors or not. But white has always worked. I haven't even used the black yet, but it's just elasticy. And you will only need this and your bobbin. And so in order to get that bunching at the top, it just needs to pull from that under stitch, and that's what pulls the fabric in. So let's get started. Okay, so I thought I'd show you real quick before I started sewing. This is the same type of dress. I haven't cleaned this one up yet. It still has all the strings, but this is the effect you get when you do the shirring. Okay, so to start, I have my fabric and I cut it into a bit of an A-line shape. I measured my daughter. She was 24 inches around, so I needed to take that measurement, 24 inches plus half of that, so plus 12. That gave me 36 inches, and that's the hardest math you'll have to do. And so cut 2 pieces of fabric 18 inches across, and then I measured her down. I wanted it to be about 28 inches down, so I cut it a little bit longer than that. And I liked a little bit of an A-line shape to just kind of give her a little bit more room through the legs, and I just think it looks cute to have a little fuller skirt. And so I ironed down the top for the hem at the top, and I'm not going to stitch that down. I'm just going to start with the shirring, and that'll be enough I don't have to do a straight stitch seam on that. And then I'm going to sew these sides together, just a straight stitch down, and I'm going to have to, looks like, fill my bobbin before I do that. But that's what I'm going to do, is just, I have a couple pins in it just to hold it, and stitch down the sides. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch down the sides now. Got my bobbin wound. I'm going to do about a 5/8 inch seam. Forward and backward. Sewn together, and at the end I'll just have to hem this. We're also going to make straps, and I'll show you how to do that. But now I'm going to turn this right side out. And I think this is easier if maybe every sewing machine has this, but this is a super nice feature. This is an inexpensive sewing machine, and it is the best, like $120 I've ever spent, because I used to use an old sewing machine, and like the thread would tangle all the time, and I just had nothing but problems. It was like a hand-me-down. And since this sewing has become much more enjoyable since getting a different sewing machine, I bought this, I don't know, 3 years ago maybe. I've been very pleased with it. So that comes off, and that just makes it easier to, work on something. If you're hemming it, it just gives you a little bit more room, and it can kind of, then your fabric can just go underneath it so much more easily, and you're not constantly working with it bunching up. So what we need to do is get our elastic thread, and when you do this, you want to wind your bobbin by hand. You don't want to use the feature on your sewing machine that use the pedal and wind your bobbin, because it would pull it too tight. So like that, pull it through. Then you're just gonna wind this by hand, and you're not putting a ton of tension on it. You're not pulling really hard. You're just winding it, you know, with just enough tension to make it neat. You're not pulling it like that and wrapping it. That's not what you're doing. It's just, like I said, enough tension to make it wrap smooth. So I like to kind of wrap toward the left until I get to the side, and then come back and wrap all the way over to the right, just to kind of keep it even and smooth. My old sewing machine, I had to wind everything by hand. All my bobbins, which, you know, if you're using thin thread, that takes a long time. So here we go. And you'll want to fill this up. And likely you're going to get, you know, part of the way through your project, I think if I remember, I had to fill the bobbin thread, this elastic thread, you know, after maybe 6 rows, I want to say. We'll see. So you'll likely have to stop and do this again throughout your project, and it's okay. Just take your time. That's the kind of stuff that I used to get so frustrated about with sewing, to where like I just didn't even want to sew. But if you just mark out your time and decide, okay, I'm gonna make this dress, and it's gonna take this time. Don't try to do it when 50 other things are going. I took my kids swimming earlier, and now it's nap time, and they're watching Dr. Pol. So if you've never watched that, you should try it. It's we live on a farm, so none of it's too shocking for them, but some of it is a little bit graphic, but they enjoy it, and I think it's educational, and I'm getting something done. So anyway, so you're just gonna put this in. Just like that. I have this hemmed or pressed down with the iron. And so my settings, let me tell you what I have here. So the length is set at 3. So the longer your length on your stitch, the more it'll pull it and bunch up. My tension I increased to about 3. You have to play around with that. I just messed around with it on a piece of scrap fabric to see. You know, you can get all kinds of variations messing around with the tension and the stitch length. So I found it a setting that worked well, to where it gave me a nice stitch. So my tension's at 3. It's a straight stitch. You could do a zigzag stitch. You could do, you know, all different kinds of stitches. You could play around with it, whatever your machine has. I'm just doing a straight stitch to keep it simple, because I'm not experienced using all the other stitches either. So what I do, I just start, and I use my presser foot kind of as my guide for how much space goes between my rows. So I mean, you could measure this. I saw, you know, some tutorials where they tell you to measure and mark with a piece of chalk or whatever. I don't have time for that. So what I do is I just go continually around until I have to change my bobbin, which you will. You'll most likely have to fill your bobbin again, but I just kind of back stitch there and then start again. I go continually. I don't stitch straight down. On Lisa's tutorial, I think that's what she had you do. I honestly don't remember. And I just kind of keep going around, and I'll show you when we get. So I'm starting at like the underarm seam here, and I do like 2 stitches backward as well. So 1, go forward, and then 2 stitches back. And then I just start going. I'm lining this up and just using my presser foot kind of as a guide. I'm keeping the fabric just lined up with the edge of the presser foot. And I did not do any other stitching. Like I just pressed this down. And so I'm letting the shearing stitch be what hems down the top of the dress. And I'm trying to think if there's any other instruction I want to give you, but we'll see as we go. Good idea is to stop and check and see if you like what's going on underneath. I think this is okay. Seems to be bunching a little bit more than I did on my previous one, but we'll see how it goes. That was just going over, you know, it kind of makes the racket going over the place where it seamed. Okay, I'm approaching where I started. And so what I do here is I just kind of angle it and go down to the next row. I don't stop, I don't tie it off, nothing like that. I just keep going. Here comes my 2-year-old. So we'll see how this goes. Hi, baby. And again, I'm just using my presser foot. I'm lining up the presser foot with the side of this first row of stitches. Now I will say you're not going to see this bunch up initially. It's going to take maybe 4 to 6 rows before you really start seeing it bunch up and pucker. So don't get discouraged if you do 2 rows and you're like, this isn't working, it just looks like a straight stitch. Because yep, that's what it looks like to start. But as you do more rows, the tension will build and it'll start to pull it in tighter. And then at the end, you can actually take an iron and kind of steam it, and that'll make it shrink up even more. So never fear, it'll be okay. Stop and show you. One of the things I was experimenting with at the beginning, what I used so much thread on, was this top part. And you can see the difference in the tension from when it's stitching on the double thickness versus the single thickness. When you get down here to the single thickness, it looks like a much neater stitch. The stitch looks much better there. So just remember that if you do your first 2 rows up here where it's doubled, and you think it's looking a little bit off, that's why. It's just the double thickness, and it's totally fine. Just keep going. Once you get to the single thickness, the backside will look much neater. Okay, so you can see I am 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 rows in. I'm gonna do about 20 rows, I think. And it's starting to pucker. You can start to really see it's going to eventually get to be where it'll be a little more difficult to kind of hold it flat while you're sewing, but I mean, that's not a big problem, just a little bit more. You'll have to pull a little bit to keep it flat as you sew. Okay, now I've done about as much as I want to do. I think it's close to 20 rows, somewhere around there. So to finish it, I'll just show you what I'm Okay, I'm getting close to the seam where I started. And I'm just gonna slowly, as I get close to this row, bring it up onto the row before. So that stitch will get closer, and I just bring it up to kind of match that row. And double stitch back. And then I'm done with this part of it. Done with the shearing part. Oh, pull my presser foot right off. Okay, now I'll show you that we're all done with this part, but you can take your iron and just go over the top of it. And that shrinks the elastic in even more. So like this top part where it was doubled, you know, it just didn't bunch up as much as the rest of it, but you just take your iron to it and it shrinks it down. So next, I'll show you how to make the straps. And I'll actually need my daughter up here again for that to measure exactly where I want this to sit on her little body and where I want the straps to go. So we'll do that next. Okay, so now that we've made the body of our dress, I measured my daughter again just to see how long the straps would be so that it would sit under her arms and not be sagging down too low or up too high so that it wasn't comfortable. So I measured that, and then I cut 2 pieces of fabric for the straps. And what you're gonna do is just fold it with your wrong sides out and iron that. Okay, so I measured, and mine I made 3 inches wide. I wanted the straps to be fairly thick by the time I sewed it and turned it right side out. So I'll take that over to the machine and show you how to do that. Okay, so I changed out my bobbin thread back to regular white thread to match the top. I changed the length setting to between 1 and 2 for the length, and I decreased the tension down to 2. My width stitch is at 0. And for this, just, you know, like about a 3/8 inch allowance on here. It doesn't really matter, however, that might even be, yeah, that's about right. So the easiest way to do this is to turn it out is probably with a safety pin, and I didn't bring one up here. So you could use a pen, or I do have one of these little clips that might be worth trying, but all you're doing is turning this right side out now. Once you've wrestled that right side out, you're going to put the seam on the bottom and then just press this nice and flat. So you're just about done with your dress. You've got your straps sewn and pressed flat. I went ahead and pressed out my hem. So all we have to do is sew the hem and attach the straps. And then of course, go with the scissors and clean up all the, all the threads that are hanging. Which, it's so funny after a project like this, you know, it's pretty simple, but that's the part I don't like. I don't like cleaning up the threads. So I'll often let my little girls do that. Here's some scissors, cut all the threads off. Okay. 3 inches. That looks about right to me. And when I stitch this on, I'm just kind of trying to go, I'm going to try to stitch it along one of the rows of shirring. I like to go over it a few times just to make sure the strap, they'll get yanked and pulled on. So I want to make sure that they're on there sturdy. At the end, the other way you could do this would be to do ties. If you wanted to have the top tie, and I asked her what she wanted, if you wanted the top to tie, then you would cut 4 of these instead of just 2. And then of course you would hem the end and finish it, and then they could just tie the top and have bows up there, which is cute, but it's kind of something else that has to be fussed with, and my girls don't like that. They'd rather slip it on and be done with it, not have to worry about somebody tying it for them or having to worry about it coming loose during the day. Although it looks super cute, so maybe for a special occasion or something. And there you are, it's all done. We'll clean it up and let her try it on. And I hope this inspired you today, that you can make clothes for your little girls or even for yourself, even with very little sewing skills. Like I am not a perfectionist when it comes to sewing. As you can see, I don't do an awful lot of precision or measuring, but it turns out just fine, and it's something that your little girls can enjoy, and just it's fun that mom made that for them, and that they got to pick out the fabric and that they got to help. So thanks so much for coming along today, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll come back next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.